start their mini camp today. Matthew Stafford and company, an intriguing team. See Puka Nacua on the screen. They're heading into next season. A seemingly very complete roster with promising rookies also who may have key roles as contributors. All that will continue to shake out over the coming months, of course. But let's zero in on the Rams' run game specifically. There's no doubt that Sean McVay has been on the cutting edge of offense. So it's interesting that the Rams ran the ball 477 times in 2023, the most in any season under McVay. LA called a designed run on 42% of the plays last year. That's seventh highest in the NFL. Pretty interesting. Do you expect McVay and company to lean even further into that run game this season?
Yeah, I sure do, Laura. And I got to start by saying this. I so admire the Rams' ability to adapt. I think there was a time early in Sean McVay's tenure of the Rams head coach and being the Rams head coach where you thought this is a team that was maybe a bit more finesse. They could throw the ball all over the yard, but did they have the grit to get those difficult yards and got to have it situations? And this past season, as you just showed based off of the volume, this team just pounded teams into oblivion on the ground. And this offseason, they've kind of said, we're going to double down. If you take a look at some of the ways in which they've addressed the running game further this offseason, Jonah Jackson, one of the highest paid guards in all of free agency. Colby Parkinson, one of the best blocking tight ends in the entire NFL. Bo Limmer, 4-year starter at Arkansas, one of the strongest players pound for pound at the program. That guy is made to run block in the NFL. And then Blake Corum, who anybody who follows college football knows was the heart and soul of that national championship winning team at Michigan. Yeah, they had this great Joe Moore award-winning offensive line, but when they needed a yard, 3 yards, 5 yards, the game plan, hand the ball off to number 2 because you knew he was going to find a way, Sam. This Rams running game could be even better than it was last year, and that's saying a lot given their success.
And it's not just the 2 or 3 yards. It's also the touchdowns for Blake Corum. Blake Corum set a Michigan record, 27 rushing touchdowns, 28 total touchdowns. For me, that tells me a few things. Number one, the only offensive player that the Rams went and got in the draft was Blake Corum. Everything else was defense as far as guys they drafted. And so you think about this. The run game that we saw last year is really just more of what we've seen from Sean McVay. I played against this offense, and I believe it was 2017 and 2018. And yes, they look like a finesse offense, but they are not. They want to run the ball and play action and get a lot of these deep overs behind linebackers' heads. And so if you can be effective in the run game, like we saw Kyron Williams was, then all of a sudden it makes linebackers go up and look like they're trying to play the run, and then the play action gets the ball right behind them. And so I love the mindset right now that we're seeing from Sean McVay, doubling down on the run and that defense to find ways to win games.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's a few things that I want to talk about because I actually just talked about this with the Chargers and how Harbaugh is reportedly, doubling down as well on the run game. And again, this is what good offensive coaches do and understand that just because they have a great quarterback and great weapons and wide receivers, you need to establish a run game that it makes everything easier, especially for your quarterback. Just because you have a quarterback who has a great arm and is an elite talent doesn't mean you want to rely on that quarterback game after game after game, drive after drive after drive. It's just too much. It's too daunting of a task no matter who you are. Tom Brady, Patrick Mahomes, Manning, it doesn't matter. It's just not winning football. So establishing a consistent, reliable run game is so important. Not to mention, we know that in football, right, everything has skewed so heavily to offense, more offensively than defensively, right? Especially even just from the rule perspective of how literal rules have changed within the NFL. And we also now even coaching philosophy has been so pass heavy. With that, over the years, the defenses are now obviously double downing and all about trying to stop the quarterback, trying to stop the wide receivers, trying to get good corner safeties, all that type of stuff. And now what does that do? That leads the potential deficit for rushing defenses. So that's what then makes it's such a strategic move as well, that when you can establish a run game and a consistent run game, you'll be able to exploit a lot of teams that have that lacking, that have that deficit, because they're so focused, right? When people are so focused, when teams are so focused on beating say Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen. Well, Josh Allen's like a more mobile quarterback, but let's just say Patrick Mahomes, right? They're thinking like we have to do everything we can to stop him. They're even building their teams, their rosters to be able to stop him, but they're not thinking necessarily of the run game. And now you establish a great run game, and especially obviously if you have a great offensive line, it could be game, set, match. Do you think that it's just luck that the 49ers have been so good for these years and they happen to have Christian McCaffrey? Because it's not, right? I mean, a lot of teams go really far when you have an established run game, especially come time playoffs when the weather gets worse. I mean, what did we see this last playoffs run in the NFL? The weather was brutal. Snowstorms, 20 plus below zero. I mean, multiple games. It's not like one-off games. It was the Chiefs versus Miami. We had the the Bills game was delayed by a day or two or whatever. Then for when they played the Steelers, I mean, it was awful. The Kansas City Chiefs versus the Ravens, it was raining. Like all of those conditions make it very difficult for the passing game to travel, whether on the road or just in general. It just becomes harder and harder and harder. So a team that has a great run game, an established run game, it matters. I mean, you look at almost all these Super Bowl winners, you always see these stats that are like these teams that are like, when they have at least 100 yards rushing, they're 10-1 this season, right? Like you see this all the time. So many teams have those stats, whether it be a Dak Prescott, or I remember the one year when the Eagles they won the Super Bowl in 2017. They had one of those stats where they were like undefeated in games that they rushing. And then you have other teams where it's like the opposite, where it's like if their defense stops the run game from getting like 100 yards or whatever, they win the game. So just because the run game has been devalued and running backs as a whole have been devalued a little bit, it doesn't mean that actually the importance of a run game is so important. The run game has been devalued in the sense of they realize that they don't maybe need to pay a running back $15 million a season or whatever it is, because they can get another running back who maybe is not as good as running back one, but can get like 90% of the production. And that's good enough to win. Like that's all you need. You don't need 100% from your running back. You just need 90%. So that's where, in the way that it's kind of been devalued. But make no mistake about it. When you have a great quarterback, great offensive weapons, their best friend can be, outside of obviously like a great defense as well, but a run game. Football is such a balanced sport. And I said this previously. Balance doesn't necessarily mean equal, right? You can have a balanced offense, and it doesn't mean you're going to run 50% of the time and you're going to throw 50% of the time. So I just think that you have to understand that when you're balancing it out, it just means that you're keeping, especially within football, I mean now, you're keeping the defense honest. You're keeping them on their toes, because when a team knows, okay, this is Stafford, we know he's going to throw the ball 45 times a game, it just becomes so much more simpler to scheme against them, to have a defensive game plan. But when you have established run game there, now you don't know which direction they're going to go into. But I do also want to emphasize that, make no mistake, last season with the Rams, Stafford was banged up, that offense was banged up, right? Like no one really knew what was going on with Kupp. Like Puka Nacua obviously shot out the gate, but that offense was a little wonky from the very beginning. So that was also why they initially probably rushed so much. So I am curious to see if they continue with that trend. It will be interesting, especially if everyone's all fully healthy and they're ready to go. So that's also something to look out for. So I wouldn't say like automatically they're guaranteed to like, again, rush for the same amount or around the same amount or even more. Because again, you have to let the game come to you, right? It also depends on, do you have the lead? Do you not have the lead? Like, are they able to get out the lead in a lot of games? Are they playing from behind more frequently? Did their defense take a step back and now they're getting a lot less points, and so now they feel pressure to throw the ball down the field? Like, there's a lot of unknowns. So that's what worked for them last season in terms of needing to rush the ball a lot. Doesn't mean that that's what they're going to do this season, but that doesn't refute anything that I just said, because you still have to establish the run game. Whether you're doubling down or you're rushing more than you ever have, it's almost irrelevant, because we do know that a great offensive head coach like a Sean McVay is going to want to establish the run game, because it helps out his quarterback, and the easier you can make the job for an already great elite quarterback, it only gives them more room to breathe and to not have to be great and elite every single throw, every single drive, because it's just not sustainable. It's just not sustainable no matter who you are. But those are just my thoughts. I would absolutely love to hear yours. What do you guys all think about the Rams doubling down on a run game? Do you think they're going to continue with that trajectory, or do you think that they're going to kind of go back to being a more pass-forward offense? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single comment, so whether you agree with me or disagree with me, either way, let's get in some discussions. Let's get in some fights. But ultimately, let's just have some fun. And please do consider subscribing. We are building an amazing community here, and I would absolutely love to see you part of it. I want to build something that we all genuinely feel connected to, something that we're really excited to be part of, and I think we're well on our way to doing it. And please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, as it really does help with the visibility and the algorithm. Thank you so much. See you next time.